Really? Peter was going to punch Jack?
That's right. But luckily I arrived in time. I'm glad I decided to check up on them.
Wow. What happened next?
Well, Jack and I left, and I think Peter and Sharon carried on with their argument.
Wow. Oh, it's a shame I wasn't there. But you knew about Jack and Sharon, didn't you?
Well, yes. I found out by chance. I came across a photo of them together while I was cleaning one day.
Wow. What an incredible story.
Could you stop saying wow? This isn't a film. If it were a film, there would be a happy ending.
Well, to tell you the truth, I think this is more exciting than The Bold and the Beautiful. What's going to happen now?
I have no idea. If Sharon doesn't go to Japan, I think she and Jack will probably get back together.
And how are you getting on? If I were you, I would forget Jack.
Oh, don't worry about me. I'll get over him.
Good girl. If I were you, I would look after myself. There are other fish in the sea, and you are such a great catch.
Thank you, Alice. But to tell you the truth, I'm looking forward to not having a man in my life for a while.
Don't say that. I know you're hurt, but what would you do if you met a nice, handsome young man who, by the way, loved cleaning as much as you do?
Well, if he loved cleaning as much as I do, I wouldn't let him go. But, you know, men like that are pretty rare.
Anyway, getting back to Jack and Sharon, how do you think it will end?
Don't worry about that. I'll send you a letter with all the details.
And I'm going to miss you, you know.
Me too. But I'm happy that you're going to work with your father. Oh, it's great that he wants you to come up with the stories for his films. It's what you really wanted, after all.
It's true. It's been such a long time since I got on so well with him. And of course, I can't wait to get on with the new film. I'm so excited about it all.
Another star in the family. Miss Dubois conquers Hollywood. Actors and actresses doing their best to impress her. No one can keep up with her.
Especially because Mars is in line with Scorpio. And what are you going to do now, Anne?
Well, the first thing I'll do is look for a new flatmate so I can carry on living in this apartment. You know how expensive it is. If I had the money, I would live here on my own.
But you're not alone. There's Jack.
And how long do you think he'll stay here? As soon as Peter leaves, he'll only be looking after Sharon and her apartment.
Hello again and welcome back for another lesson in your live TV program of English language. I want to look more closely at the dialogue that they just had because they are using some very interesting verbs called phrasal verbs. Now, a phrasal verb, let me give you an example. I'm glad I decided to check up on them. Now, this is a verb with some prepositions. What happens is the verb itself changes its meaning. And it's actually sometimes very difficult to guess what it means. So, when a verb has a preposition or even two prepositions after it, and it changes its meaning, its original meaning, we call it in English a phrasal verb. So what I want to do with you now is to use the board and also the examples that there were in the dialogue. And we'll see that there are two groups. In fact, the screen will be divided into two groups. One will be 2-word phrasal verbs, and the other is 3-word phrasal verbs. Let me explain a little bit better. For example, Anne said, the example before, I'm glad I decided to check up on them. You see that? To check up on them. Check with 2 prepositions. Now, this verb, to check up on them, means to look at something more closely, to examine something more in depth. All right? So that is the new meaning. Anne then said, I think Peter and Sharon carried on with their argument. Now, carry usually means this. You know, you pick something up and you carry it. If you add prepositions, so the example here is to carry on, it changes meaning, and carry on here means to continue. So, I think Peter and Sharon carried on with their argument means to continue their argument. All right? So, let's carry on. Then Anne said, I found out by chance. Found out, that becomes the meaning of discover. I discovered something. Okay, so find out. Next one. She said, I came across a photo. Now, came across. Very difficult to understand what that means. Because in this context, to come across, it means to find something or to find someone by chance. She says, I came across a photo of them together while I was cleaning one day. Okay, you see, they're not easy, quite complicated. Anne then said, I think she and Jack will get back together. So, look at that. That is a 3-word phrasal verb. There are 2 prepositions, to get back together, and that means to become a couple again. Okay, to reconcile, get back together. Then Anne said, oh, don't worry, I'll get over him. Interesting. Impossible to guess the meaning. Get over means to forget about. I'll get over him means I'll forget him. All right? Alice says, if I were you, I would look after myself. Look at that one. Look after, again, difficult to imagine. It means to take care of. Take care of yourself. So, if I were you, I would look after myself. Good. Next one, there are 2 more. It's been a long time since I got on so well. Now, to get on with means to have smooth relations with a person. It means that the relationship is going well without problems. To get on with. And the last one. Anne says, I'm looking forward to not having a man in my life. Again, look at that. To look forward to. Again, very interesting. This has 2 prepositions, look forward to. And it means that you think of an event in the future with pleasure. I could say to you, I look forward to seeing you again in the next lesson. All right, so these are the phrasal verbs, very difficult. People hate them. And they say, well, why don't you use easier verbs in English? Well, they come from Anglo-Saxon, and because we use them very often, I'm afraid you have to get familiar with them. All right? So we'll keep practicing. And I'll see you again. I look forward to seeing you again in the next lesson. Okay? Bye.
Hi, Sharon. Could I speak to you for a moment? Sure, Peter. I'm listening.
You know, I thought a lot about what you told me. Well, I have to admit you're right. I haven't been paying very much attention to you. I won't be angry if you don't want to stay with me.
Oh, Peter. Don't worry about me. Just look forward to your musical. It's your big break, isn't it? If you weren't so committed, you wouldn't be the man for the job now, would you? You're a star, right?
Yes, I know. It just isn't easy imagining Japan without you.
It won't be easy for me either. But I'm sure it's the right decision for both of us.
I hope so. If I were rich and famous already, I'd send along my private jet so you could visit me on weekends.
Yeah, right. The petrol alone would cost you your fortune.
Who cares? I'd be rich.
So, while I wait for you to bring your career off and become rich, I might come visit you. Maybe with Anne. But if you're famous, you'll forget all about me. You'd let it go to your head and wouldn't have time to take care of me. I couldn't keep up with all those beautiful young actresses.
How could I forget you, Sharon? By the way, would you mind me taking that beautiful photo of you along to Japan with me? The one hanging in the living room. It'll help me when I'm missing you. Especially in the beginning.
Of course, Peter. Take it. I'll be happy to give it to you.
Thank you. Well, I have to get on with packing. One last thing. If we were to meet in a few years, in 2 apartments close to each other, you with your new boyfriend, would you pretend not to know me like you did with Jack?
Why do you ask me that?
I don't know. Just curious. I guess it would be fun to meet you somewhere else and have a little secret between us two.
Hello again and welcome back for some more English. Did you hear Peter say to Sharon, if I were rich and famous, I would send along my private jet so she could visit him at weekends? If I were rich and famous, I would send along my private jet? Well, that's a bit improbable, isn't it? But it's useful for us because it means that we can learn another grammatical form, because he was using the second conditional. Remember, in another lesson we learnt the first conditional. This one is the second conditional. So, if I were rich and famous, I'd send along. Now, this is unusual because you say to yourself, wait a minute, if I were, that's not right, because I taught you, I was, you were, he, she, it was, we were, you were, they were. How can you say if I were? Well, it's a special grammatical form. It's a subjunctive form, probably the only subjunctive form left in English. And when you say, if I were you, you're putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. Okay? He says, if I were rich and famous. He uses the verb to be, and this is where the subjunctive comes into play. All right? So, very unusual. You must have probably heard this expression, if I were you. If I were you, I would do this. And I want to give you some examples of that because it's very common in English. If I say to you, for example, I'm tired, you could answer, if I were you, I'd go to bed. Now, if I were you, that's the past form, followed by I would go to bed. That's the conditional form, conditional to. If I were you, I would go to bed. Another example, smoking, yeah? I say, look, I can't stop smoking. I want to stop smoking, but I can't. You could say to me, well, if I were you, I'd go to a hypnotist, for example. One possibility, why not? If I were you, I would. Another example, imagine that I am bitten. Look, Mr. Snake bites me. I've been bitten by a snake. I've been bitten by a snake. You could say to me, well, if I were you, I would suck your blood out. Or, if I were you, I would go immediately to a doctor. So do you see how this works? If I were you, I would. Let's go to the screen now because I want to show you that example and also normal examples of the second conditional. So, we use the second conditional when something is improbable. That's why we use if. Let's look at some normal examples. We have if plus the simple past and then would and the infinitive. So a typical example is, if I won the lottery, win 1-1, I'd buy a house. Yeah. If I won the lottery, I'd buy a house. I would buy a house. It's improbable, but if he didn't smoke, negative, past, negative, he wouldn't need an operation. You see, if plus the simple past in the negative and then would in the negative. If you ate less, you would lose more weight. If you ate less, you'd lose more weight. All right, so those are normal examples of the hypothetical situations of the second conditional. And now let's get back to the example I did with you. If I were rich and famous, remember that? If I were. In the episode it was, if he were rich and famous, he'd send an airplane to Sharon. Okay? If I were you, I would forget Jack. If I were you, I would forget Jack. If I were you, I would continue studying with me and English today, if I were you. All right, so that's the second conditional for you. There are 3. We've studied number 1, we've studied number 2, and later on we'll see number 3 too. Okay? So, goodbye for now. Bye.
So it's just you and me, isn't it, Anne?
Well, really, it's just me, all alone.
Are you still angry?
No, I was just joking. Of course, it'll be difficult to forget a man like you.
You're just pulling my leg now, aren't you, Anne? I wanted to say, if it had been a different time in my life, or if there weren't Sharon, maybe we would, or rather, maybe we could.
Too many ifs, Jack. Anyway, I'm happy for both you and Sharon. Really. You know, I adore love stories with happy endings.
Hey, don't jump to conclusions. Sharon just left Peter.
Okay. Let things take their natural course. You know, as Alice would say if she were here.
I really miss her craziness. And her jokes. The house just isn't the same without her.
That's true. She always had something to say. I miss so many things. Like Peter. I even miss his singing exercises.
But they were awful. Our poor ears.
I know, but I was used to them. By the way, how did things turn out in the end between you two?
Pretty well. We had a long talk, and he understood it really wasn't my fault, that it was inevitable. Peter was just too involved with his career to notice Sharon's needs and desires. Let's just say I took advantage of their situation.
I'd say so. You've never missed a chance like that in your life, have you?
It's late. I have to go. I'm late as usual. By the way, Sharon and I are going to see a film tonight. Would you like to come?
Thanks for the invitation, Jack. But I'd prefer to stay home. Anyway, a possible new flatmate is coming to take a look at the apartment, and well, his name's Nick. Well, actually, I've got to get things tidied up.
That's right. Cleanliness is next to godliness, huh? Don't work too hard, Anne. Perhaps Nick is less tidy than Alice and I put together.
Oh, no. I lost the battle with you two, but it's time to put an end to all this chaos. I'll ask him all the right questions, but if I get the feeling he doesn't like cleaning, I won't let him in the door.
Hello again, everyone. Jack exits and Nick enters. Maybe. We'll see. Now, I have a quiz for you. You've learnt a lot of language up until now, and I want to see how much you remember of what you've learnt. The quiz is this. I will say something which is wrong, and you, with all your grammar knowledge, must correct it. Let me give you an example. I say, when have you gone? Now that's wrong, because when uses the simple